one more short story. Hello, and thank you for joining us on episode 9 of One More Short Story, the Writing Battle mini audiobook podcast. I'm looking forward to sharing 4 stories with you today. In keeping with recent episodes, we are using the Writing Battle class system. This episode is centered around the Barbarian class. Now, that doesn't mean there's going to be lots of descriptions of massive, muscly, mostly naked, hairy men. Although, if you're into that, that's fine. There's no judgment here whatsoever. It does mean the episode is focused on dystopian, post-apocalyptic stories, that sort of thing. And we've got four little treats here. I say little. 3 of them are 1,000 words. 1 of them is 500 words. Anyone that's written those to a deadline knows that that's not little at all. And it's a real skill to be able to trim a story down into sort of flash fiction length. As you might expect from stories of this type, there are some depictions of violence in all the stories except for first aid. There's violence towards people, there's violence towards animals, and I don't want to get into a big debate or dialogue about content warnings. I can absolutely see that some people need a sort of a heads up, watch out for this. But I will just say, tread warily if the depictions of violence are not for you and are not going to be something that are going to make your day any better. First up, we have got Dead or Alivened by Jesse Locatelli. This was in the recent Fear battle and contains a really, really good use of the prompts, actually. Prompts are often the subject of debate on the forum, but hey, they're there for a reason, and Jessie's done a top job here. She had Dystopia, Compass, and Mourner, and has done some lovely stuff here. So, without further ado, narrated by S.B. Anthony, here is Dead or Alivened by Jesse Locatelli.
I didn't know the woman standing in front of me. Sure, she had the same features as Mom, sharp, like a raven with a secret. She had the same laugh as Mom, like a pot of pasta water bubbling on the stove. She even moved the same, and her eyes crinkled at the edges, just like Mom. Except she wasn't Mom. Mom died yesterday. My Stacia. She leaned forward to look into my eyes, close and concerned, like the time I fell off the garden wall when I was 6. Why aren't you smiling? I can't even tell I died. Fear and relief battled until they compromised in a half smile. My face doesn't know what to do with itself. Here's the thing. Not being a believer made you a mourner, and mourners are traitors, and traitors are re-educated. Before Mom died, and they slipped a note and a silver compass into my pocket, the mourners, as an organized group, were only half real to me. Guess they thought I was scared and angry enough to safely recruit as I fled a failed protest with Mom's blood staining my mask. I opened my arms to accept not Mom's hug. She pulled me into a bosom that smelled like strawberry cupcakes, just like Mom made whenever I cried about my friend Joyce being alivened after her family tried to leave the city. For the first time in my life, I wanted to believe. I wanted to return to butterfly kisses and laughter on the hammock. But Alivened were not the people they replaced. Mom knew. Someone she had loved once had been Alivened. Why are you crying then, my sweet? Not Mom said. There's no need to grieve me. Right. Because no death meant no mourning, and no mourning meant no grief, and no grief meant no scream crying into a pillow because you'd never hear pasta water laughter again. How could I grieve someone while she pets my hair and hums lullabies I grew up with? I'm crying because I'm so happy you're alive, I lied. One of Mom's honey-colored eyes had burst from her skull in a splurt of bloody jelly right onto my face. She wasn't alive. Why don't we bake something and put all this behind us? Not Mom said. Strawberry cupcakes? Just like my birthday. I hoped I looked excited enough. If I was sent for re-education while the mourner's letter sat in my pocket, I wouldn't come home the next day. Some soulless Alivened would. It's funny. You hated strawberries before your 7th birthday. Not Mom laughed. We spent the evening pretending life was normal, mashing strawberries until they turned to jelly like the sludge Mom's eye left behind. We mixed batter and scooped it into a tin until it filled the cup, like a pink little brain we created to replace the one splattered on the sidewalk. It was an eternity before Not Mom went to bed. She wanted to sit on the hammock and reminisce like everything was fine. Before she died, Mom taught me to sneak around the city. If Not Mom was really her, she would have caught me before I unclasped the latch. She didn't. As soon as the door closed behind me, I reread the note. The compass will disable the cameras and barriers as it points you to us. We'll meet you where the arrow shines blue and take you to our camp, the mourners. Lines of surveillance cameras installed by the ministry to ensure everyone commuted in an orderly manner scanned the empty streets in front of me. Here goes nothing. I placed the compass on my palm and let it guide me with a glowing golden arrow. It pointed to the right. The first camera twitched in my direction, then twisted to film the empty corner opposite of me. Not a single camera turned my way as I escaped through a barrier at the city's edge. I wove through the trees and stopped in a clearing when sparks danced over the surface of the compass like a spider web. The arrow glowed pale blue. A man with a graying beard and hair sprang up from the trees like a ragged and starved squirrel. I stumbled backwards, covering my mouth. His clothes were rough spun and natural, rather than the stiff uniforms I'd grown up with. Apparently, outside the city, things were allowed to be disorderly. What would that freedom feel like? Here for the mourners. He gestured to the compass. I'm Mick. Stacia. I tried to reconcile him with the rebel mourners Mom whispered about. Good to meet you. Shame about your mom, he said. She was one of our first undercover agents in the city. She was a mourner? I shouldn't have been surprised. We'd spent so much time sneaking around cameras, defacing the ministry. I didn't realize that was mourner business. Yup, Mick said. Showed up about 10 years ago. Furious Alivened weren't real. He bowed his head in quiet respect. She had a good run. No one else had given me the space to mourn. Thank you. I started forward, ready to go. One last check. He stopped me. Can't accidentally bring an Alivened back, Can't have those things living with us. I'm sure you understand after. I nodded mutely. He pulled a handheld device from his satchel that flashed a light in both my eyes. I barely breathed. It beeped. That's good, right? His lips twitched into a half smile. Stacia. He lowered the device. What? I'm so sorry. Mick raised a gun. The barrel was dark and empty as Not Mom's eyes. Scanner says you died 10 years ago. I didn't. I started to argue. I'd know if I was soulless, like the Alivened. I'd learned to spot them at the alivening protests Mom took me to after I fell from the garden wall 10 years ago. Mom was home. Maybe I could have had butterfly kisses and laughter in the hammock if only the gun's safety clicked off. We'll mourn you, like you should have been mourned back then.
I did warn you. This was about dystopian or post-apocalyptic stuff. But wow, that was quite something, Jesse. Thank you for that, and very, very well narrated by SB Anthony there. Thank you. It's one of those stories where if you go back and listen to it or read it again, you realise what a great job the author's done in weaving stuff in, little breadcrumbs, little treats, little hints, that when you read it again, you not only enjoy the story in different levels, but it helps the reader feel a bit clever. That's always fun. That's always good. It's a very strong piece, and it took the runner-up position in the entire dystopia genre. Did extremely well, and I hope Jessie is pleased with herself about this story, because you absolutely should be. Next up, we have got Circus Terrible by Nova Sommers. This was also in the fear battle with the dystopia genre, and Nova had dystopia, clown, and shield as her prompts. This story, as well as mentions of violence, does contain mentions of violence against an animal, which, that's not something I relish or run out and want to go and look at explicitly, but I tell you what, it is absolutely necessary to this story, and this is a heck of a piece of writing, so buckle up. This is Circus Terrible by Nova Sommers, and that's narrated by Maverick Jones.
When I was little, I would leave behind something small in every town we passed through. A toy soldier, a penny, a string of plastic beads from the carnival midway, tiny monuments buried in the holes from our tent poles. I imagined future anthropologists brushing back the earth, puzzling over a forgotten civilization's trinkets. Someone was here. I was here. Now, in the drained marshlands that were once the Florida Everglades, I kneel beside an elephant taking her last breaths, and think again about our legacy. Shell casings, bones. The animal's flank heaves, and her bullet-ridden flesh shivers. She stopped answering to her circus name long ago, opting to do as she pleased. But I whisper it to her now. Mara, don't die. They say elephants never forget. Our camp occupies a former sanctuary for retired circus animals. A big top tent's rotted wooden ribs jut from the mud like fossils. People here live off scavenged food and whatever the swamp gives back. We stopped wondering if we will ever cross borders again to bestow a few hours of forgetting upon the occupied villages between here and Canada. Mara pulled our carts and cleared trees in the camp. She guarded the children when drones passed overhead, tucking them beneath her body like a hen shielding her chicks from a raptor. We fed and protected her in return. When she staggered to camp tonight and collapsed, the earth shook. The sound of motorbike engines reaches us from the road. Titus, all in black leather, has come to claim his prey. Mara's carcass can feed his small posse for a month, and they'll trade the surplus meat and ivory. In the ring, Titus always wore red suspenders and a grin so wide it made people look away. When the circus collapsed, he kept the makeup, but lost the gags. He ruled over his group of scavengers, hoarding spoils taken from various settlements, including ours. As the moon rises, he stands over Mara's body, haloed by the motorbike's headlamps. Stupid animal, he scoffs, pointing his rifle towards the ground and resting his arm on it. He had ambushed her from the road as she bathed in the pond, a quarter mile from camp. The pop, pop, pop of the shots resounded, and I knew. Next we heard and saw our bloody giant crashing toward camp, her head swinging low as she weakened. We were powerless. I keep my eyes on Mara and say nothing to Titus. We've all seen the endless cruelty he's capable of. He notices a tin shield leaned against a tent post, an old prop painted with an elephant beneath 3 stars. In a circus act, Titus cracked a whip at me while I hid behind that shield, and the crowd gasped. Now we use it to collect water. He tilts his head, amused. Won't save you now, he says, grinning. When night comes, Titus and his men pitch tents near the generator. In the morning, they plan to dismember their trophy and haul her away in pieces. People shelter in their caravans, outgunned and afraid. I keep vigil beside Mara's body. The shield lies near the tip of her trunk, where the children attempted to get her to drink. Fog rolls in, blanketing the camp. I fetch 2 jerry cans from the supply hut and carry them back through the mud. My knees shake, and I feel the old pain in my wrist from when I missed a cue during a performance, and Titus grabbed me harder than he needed to. He'll get rich selling Mara off by the pound. I won't let that happen. The gasoline spills in shining arcs across her body. Fumes sting my nostrils. I work frantically, cutting deep gashes with my machete so the fuel can reach inside. The blade makes a sound like wet, rasping breath. I think of pointed tent stakes again, of burying pennies in soft earth. Every stroke feels like a violent protest against what we've been reduced to. Behind me, Titus shouts. He strides over, gun pointed. 2 of his men are behind him. I raise the shield without thinking. Muscle memory. A bullet glances off with the sound of a church bell. Then the night goes silent, except for the hum of the generator. I strike my Zippo, and the men back away, watching the standoff. Me with the flame, Titus with his gun. If he shoots, I'll drop the lighter on Mara's gas-soaked body. No, he says, desperate to save his gold mine, his cash cow. The fire catches faster than I imagined. For a moment, Mara is pure light, terrible and holy. A mountain becoming a star. The heat drives us backward. Titus's makeup accentuates his angry grimace. He regains footing and fumbles with his gun. That's when I fling the last liters of gasoline onto him, moving with deft ballerina steps that are second nature to me, daughter of 2 trapeze artists. Flames leap from Mara onto her murderer. Instead of watching him flail and burn, I follow the smoke as it curls upward like a signal, an ephemeral story told to the stars. By morning, the swamp is quiet, except for the patter of light rain. The men departed in the night, happy to be free from their cruel leader. I find the shield in the ashes, warped but still whole. I place it beside Mara's charred skull. I dig a small hole in the dirt. From my pocket, I pull a useless coin, a toy soldier missing an arm, and a bead the color of dried blood. I want to believe memory is a kind of shield, that, by remembering, we protect what matters from being eaten up by the world. We find small ways to leave our mark. I press mud over the objects and imagine the future, when students or scholars or machines will find this hoard and wonder what kind of people we were.
Well, if you're anything like me, that story took you on something of an emotional roller coaster where you were right there with Mara, the elephant, and ruining the awful stuff that humanity's capable of, and then skip forward a few paragraphs and we've got Titus getting his just desserts. He's a really hateable character, and that's a good thing. It's very well written indeed. Again, some wonderful prose in that story, and one of the many things I enjoyed in that story was the bookends at the beginning and the end about hiding little artifacts in the dirt, in the mud, so that people who come after us can find those things and wonder what we might have been like as people. That got all the way to the Ferocious Four, a semi-finalist in that contest. Now, I should add that I'm not just looking for stories that get to the final or the semi-final. I've got a huge variety of stories on the cards, both for future episodes and also in the back catalogue if you've only just started listening. One thing you'll pick up very quickly, if you haven't picked it up already, is that within the world of Writing Battle, the quality of the stories all round is very high. Yeah, you'll see stories like the ones we've got today that have got quite far in the competition, and deservedly so, and then you'll come across other stories in your own reading or through friends or friends of friends that you look at and just think, that is exceptional. How has it not got further? This is the nature of something that's judged by many people. It's going to happen that way, and the quality of the stories is what we should be focusing on. Obviously, it's easy for me to sit here and say that, and I may not be quite so stoic about it when it's my own stories up against the judges and their particular opinions one way or the other. Unless you voted for mine, in which case, of course, you are the best judges on the face of the earth. Moving on, we have Step Lightly by Elmira Olson. So Step Lightly, we're rewinding a bit to the spring battle from last year, and the genre was apocalyptic game show, which, as you can imagine, brought out a huge variety of fantastic stories. This one really, it does something special with the idea of an apocalyptic game show, and I don't want to give away the goods now because it's not fair on Elmira. It's a great story. So we had a 500-word story with apocalyptic game show, and the other prompts were limousine and prisoner. And this is read by Rebecca Lynn. So we have Step Lightly by Elmira Olson, narrated by Rebecca Lynn.
I teetered precariously on a large log that rolled in churning water as fragments of a song floated through my head. That's how the log rider learns to step lightly. My brother, David, always loved that song. When we were little, he begged me to sing it over and over. He was my motivation. I played this game for him. A guard fired a warning shot, and I leapt to the next log. Agonized cries filled the air, but I ignored everyone else and concentrated. An alligator snapped at my leg, and I jumped again, landing on a huge snapping turtle, then pushed off before it sank. I dive-rolled onto the bank. I was through. I rushed to the finish line and collapsed. The announcer's voice reverberated. The first of the contestants has made her way through. Will she survive tomorrow? The crowd cheered. He announced the success of 2 more players. I covered my ears while gunshots cut short the screams of the rest. The top 3 had made it. I had made it. Tomorrow was the final game. I limped to the waiting limousine and threw myself inside, where the other survivors and I were separated and handcuffed. Soon we were back in our cells, the prison echoing in silence. The games had started with 500 participants. First came Space Invaders. The falling grenades decimated our numbers. Then the ghosts and Pac-Man, armed guards draped in sheets, had taken out many of the remaining 80. And today, after Frogger, we were down to the final 3. Settled on my thin mattress, every muscle in my body trembled with exhaustion. I retrieved the weapon I'd kept in reserve for the final, then traced my fingers along the name carved into the cement wall. David. For him, I could survive one more day. This was the last prison in existence. When it reached capacity, the games began, making room for the next batch of prisoners. Winners were pardoned and given $1 million. Desperate people committed crimes just for a chance to play the games. So many of us were starving in the wake of the collapse, and a 1 in 500 chance at a fortune didn't seem that bad. But the reality was horrifying. The games were barbaric and needed to end. The next day was a blur. Breakfast in the empty cafeteria, the limo back to the arena. Then rolling barrels, screeching primates, and endless ladders. But I made it to the top and won. Sweaty and bruised, I dragged myself to the grandstand on a broken ankle. Jeers swept across the elite crowd, a vicious mob who didn't care that thousands had died for their entertainment. The leader stepped from his balcony, bringing a gold medal. But I wasn't here for useless trophies. As I approached, recognition sparked in his eyes. Then fear as I shivved my brother with the sharpened toothbrush I'd saved just for him. David, creator of the games, was finally dead.
Well, there we are. David got what was coming to him. I've always enjoyed stories that are sort of post-apocalyptic or dystopian and just a bit bleak, and pushing that idea of what humanity can do. So one of the many things I enjoyed about that was the old school video game stuff. So your Space Invaders, the Frogger, and the lovely stuff at the end with Donkey Kong, barrels and screeching primates and stuff. I really enjoyed that. Darkly comedic. And, things like Squid Game. You've got the dystopian stuff there, but then also it didn't take too long for people to start making real life, non-lethal versions of these games or sorts of games. And stories like this have been around for a while, right? We have the Running Man, Battle Royale, various things of that nature. How much would it take to get human beings to knock something like this up? I don't think I want to know the answer to that question if I'm being totally honest. But yeah, really, really lovely stuff from Elmira and very well read by Rebecca. That song at the beginning that Rebecca gave us a little excerpt from about that's how the log rider learns to tread lightly. That is a real song. That is a real song. Elmira did not just make it up, although I would have no issue if she did. That's okay. But it's a real song. I learned something new when I found that out. This story got to the thrilling 32, so top 32 writers out of hundreds and hundreds of people having a crack at the apocalyptic game show genre. Well done, Elmira. Finally today we have First Aid by Megan Griffo. This was also from the dystopia genre in the Fear Battle. You can critique me heavily for my lack of imagination in which genres I'm going for, but it's a dystopian and apocalyptic themed episode. These stories are brilliant, and lots of them were in the same genre in one battle. I'm okay with that. I will sleep soundly, having made that decision. First Aid, the prompts that Megan had to work with were dystopia, paramedic, and metronome. It's narrated by Regan Westergard, and just like all our narrators, I'm very pleased with what she's done here. I won't spoil First Aid for you. I hope you enjoy it. I absolutely did. Here is First Aid by Megan Griffo, narrated by Regan Westergard.
When I was 9, I slid a thick book off my father's desk. Anatomy of a Heart. Enamored by its cover's blues and reds, I sat on the floor for hours, sounding out foreign words. When my father came home, he found me crying. "Is it true our hearts can stop?" I asked, curled in his lap, my ear against his chest. "Yes." He never lied to me. But sometimes we can bring them back to life. How? He looked around, then pulled a metronome from his shelf. "Lie down," he said. "I'll show you." When it was my turn to practice soft compressions on him, I froze. I didn't like seeing him even feign helplessness. "If you get scared, focus on the tempo," he said, tapping my knee to the metronome. "Block everything else out." What if I don't have one when I need it? I asked. What if I can't save you? You can make one in your head, V, he said. You can even save me with your own music. Of course, when they came for him, no melody could ward them off. By then I was 19, and we'd prepared as much as we could. The new orders had been in place for 5 years. Guards ravaged our apartment, collecting piles of medicine my father had been stealing from his ambulance. I pressed my tongue against my teeth. You can't scream when it happens, he'd told me. Act clueless. Act like I repulse you. What will happen to you? I'll be okay, he said. I knew this couldn't be true, but I believed him anyway. While 2 guards punched holes in our walls looking for secret stashes, another recited the charges. You're under arrest for providing unauthorized medical care to individuals whose bodies have been deemed irreparable. It was odd. They'd burst in with such force, violent energy dripping off their uniforms. But I could see, even from feet away, how this guard handled my father with care, almost massaging his wrists as he cuffed him. While his colleagues shattered our belongings, his eyes drifted to my feet, which I'd planted over a jagged tile that opened up to the underground passageway where we did our drop-offs, and enough medication to get our patients through the next 2 months. He said nothing. Is it true our hearts can stop? I swore mine did as they ushered my father out the door. I swore mine slipped right out of my body, left to stain on our egg-white floors, left me without a tempo to follow. Most rebel paramedics had their homes raided too, so I rationed our supply, unsure what I'd do when I ran out. The desperation in my patients' voices grew stronger. I became a Rolodex of medical jargon. Ehlers-Danlos, schizoaffective, diabetes, epilepsy, bipolar, Rett. In bed, I'd list off medications, trying to drown out nightmares. Gabapentin, insulin, olanzapine. Father, where are you? 4 months in, when the gentle guard reappeared, I knew it was over. Routine follow-up, he said, to make sure we didn't miss anything. Right, I conceded. His eyes scanned the room. Well, looks orderly. He reached under his jacket, unclipped a fanny pack, and handed it to me. So long, he said, and left before I could reply. I let my body settle, then unzipped the bag and turned it over. Pill bottles fell to the floor. Every few months, he'd return, perform his script, and leave. I felt like a stray cat waiting to be trapped, but unable to resist food I didn't have to hunt. One day, though, as he handed off contraband, my grip weakened. The bag fell to my feet. How long have you had that tremor? He asked. Don't have a tremor, I said. After all this time, you still don't trust me? I don't know you, I said. So, no. My name's Niall. Doesn't matter, I said. You're one of them. I'm not, he said. I flicked the badge on his chest. It's how I'm surviving, he said. Is this supposed to clear your conscience or something? Kinda hostile for someone who willingly takes my help. Fuck you, I said. You abducted my father. What'd you want me to do? He said. Rebel? Then what? There goes your supply. I stood in silence. Give me your hand, he said. When he touched me, my heart thumped. He unfurled each finger and kneaded my palm with his thumbs. How long's it been doing this? A while. He stretched my knuckles. My eyes watered. They told me if I joined, my sister could continue treatment, he said. I'm fighting the best way I can, same as you. I almost couldn't bring myself to ask. Is he alive? I don't know. They sometimes spare EMTs if they consider their minds valuable. Can you find him? I'll try. He squeezed my hand. I'll see if I can get something for that, too. When he left, I held my wrist and waited for my pulse to slow. A year passed. Niall began using our underground network to increase his visits. He'd massage my hand and I'd let him. My hope swept in and out like a tide each day, and grief pressed against my ribs, but I started to get used to it all as much as anyone could. And then... "Here," Niall said one day, handing me a strip of paper. The walls went out of focus. I realized I'd grown comfortable in not knowing. What if I couldn't save him? What if... "V," it said in familiar handwriting, "I'm okay." I could hear his voice. "Remember, focus on the tempo." I read it again and again, through my tears and over Niall's joyful howl. I pressed the paper to my chest, let its ink streak into my skin, let it seep into my blood, course through my veins, force its way to my aorta. Is it true our hearts can stop? For the first time, I considered the answer may be no.
I absolutely had to include this story last in the podcast. All 4 stories in this show, very, very well written, very well narrated. This is the one with the most potentially upbeat ending. We're not going to go with "they all lived happily ever after." We're not going to have "it was all a dream" or anything of that nature, thank you very much. But that really, really beautiful, gentle line at the end. Is it true our hearts stop? For the first time I considered the answer might be no. I mean, that's an awful lot summed up there. An attitude to life and death and the awful situation they're in, where people are judged as to whether or not they are fit for healthcare. And of course her father, hearing the news that her father may well be alive, and at the end of the day, whilst there are things that we can control and things we can't control and things we wish we could control, etc., etc., the one thing we can all do is hope. So stories like this really appeal. An excellent job from Megan Griffo. This, in the fear battle, got to the Sweet 16, the final 16 out of the hundreds of writers in the dystopia category. And I can tell you that genre had an awful lot of very, very strong stories, as did the Apocalyptic Game Show, as in fact every genre in every battle has a huge amount of strong stories. So I do like to reference how stories have done and give them credit, absolutely. But as we've seen, just because a story doesn't win overall or come very, very close to winning does not mean it's not good. And some writers just choose to leave their stories there and say, fair enough, I've done that and I'm happy with it. Others choose to submit their stories to other online magazines or expand them, turn them into longer pieces of flash fiction, maybe even full-blown short stories, or more. Maybe even a novella or a novelette, which I recently found out is actually a real word, a novelette. It's not as long. Oh, hang on, I'm going to get confused. Novelette, novella, novel, nov. Would that be next? I don't know. Just Anyway, while I go and ponder all that, I'm going to say thank you very much for listening to our 4 superb dystopian stories today. Thank you for joining me on episode 9 of One More Short Story with me, Chris Fulwell. We'll see you next time.